This video is a part 2 of talking about what the first week of postpartum is like, the first week of having a baby. You know, you're really in the thick of that newborn phase. So today I'm going to talk about really what I focus on days roughly like 4 through 7. Today we are 9 days after birth. So it's very fresh on my mind of what those first initial days are like, what I've experienced now twice. This is my second. We did a home birth, but this is my second postpartum, and both of them I found to be very similar. But I've also found that the second time I have done substantially better at navigating it. So I want to talk about some of the things that I do and what I concentrate on, what has really helped me, because personally I find that days 4 through 7 are very challenging. So if you are in those days, just know that you are really in the thick of it, and it's not going to be like that forever. So let's dive into what, those days really encompass. One big part of days 4 through 7 is milk supply. And that's arguably the biggest transition that I notice in those days, because typically around day 4 is when my milk supply fully comes in, like full throttle milk supply is in. I start noticing it day 3. So if you've ever looked into how to hand express, and that's where you manually can just get a little bit of milk to come out so that you can see it, because when your baby's eating and they're feeding, it's hard for you to know what are they actually eating right now, especially during that first week, because your milk goes through dramatic changes in those first 7 days. So by doing hand expression, that's one way that I know what I'm doing. The other way I'm going to talk about in a minute, but through hand expression, I can see starting around day 3 that kind of clear yellowish colostrum look that was initially coming out, those first 2 days and into day 3, it starts to have a more milky appearance. It's still yellow, but it's like more creamy yellow now. And then starting day 4, it becomes even more and more milky looking. It's still very yellow. You still have tons of colostrum in there. You're still working through that. But it's definitely having more of a look of milk. But the thing you're going to notice even more than that is that your chest is essentially going to, for me, mine like doubles in size from 1 day postpartum to day 4 postpartum. Like the growth and the change is so dramatic. And for me, when that milk fully comes in, it always creates almost like, so my chest gets huge and it feels like boulders. Like there's no squish to my chest at that point, if that makes sense. Like they're so full that they feel like actual, like 2 rocks on my chest. And I just need you to know that that is not forever. That is just that milk supply like coming in hard. And for some people, their milk supply doesn't come in super intensely. You need to make sure you're super hydrated. Make sure you are getting lots and lots of good fluids, and watch your caffeine intake. Because if you're just drinking caffeine and barely surviving, then that's going to pull all your fluids out, and you're not going to have enough fluids to prepare for, your milk supply to transition. Me personally, I like just drinking basic water. That gets kind of boring though. So I like electrolyte packs. That just gives some like excitement to my water throughout the day, and it helps me make sure that it's actually getting into my system. And then I also like herbal teas. Right now, I personally am still drinking a mixture that is nettles, alfalfa, and red raspberry leaf. Occasionally I'll put a little bit of black tea in there, but I'd say majority of the time it's just the herbs. So the herbs are helping my body stay hydrated. They provide lots of minerals and nutrients. Bless you. And it really, really helps with that hydration. And I drink that twice throughout the day, sometimes 3 times. So I'm drinking lots and lots of herbal tea. But back to it, that milk supply is going to come in super heavy, usually right around day 4. And if you've never experienced this before, it can make you question whether or not you want to breastfeed at all, because it's incredibly intense. But what I found the second time to make it easier is to just relax, breathe through it, and try not to do too many things to modify it. Like, let your body kind of work through what your body needs to go through. For the most part, there's always troubleshooting. For me, mine comes in so heavily that both times I've actually, on my right side, I have milk go all the way up into my armpits. Which, like, I'll have like a golf ball size, almost like, feels like a knot in my armpit, and it's actually milk. So the second time, the first time 2 years ago when I went through postpartum, I panicked. I was like, oh my gosh, I have milk in my armpits and it's never going to come out. But this time I'm like, okay, we've been here before. We're going to breathe through this and we're going to let it work its way out. The few things that I did do, I didn't do any manual massage. I didn't like irritate it. I wasn't trying to essentially bother it at all. The only thing I did do was a really, really hot shower, not like scalding hot, but like pretty warm. And I really let that water, like the hot water, I spent a lot of time with it on my chest so that it really heated things up, just kind of helped promote good movement. You can also do hot packs. If you have like those rice packs that you can warm up and just lay like a heating pad on there. Those are the 2 things that I kind of lean into. I don't lean into pumping, and that can be a first go-to of, oh my goodness, I got to pump this milk out because I have too much. But what I find is if you pump, it's going to convince your body, like your body right now is trying to figure out how much milk do you need? How much milk does your baby need to survive? And it's trying to essentially gauge it. And for mine, it comes in way too heavy. It's like, you need so much, and I don't. So if I pump it to relieve myself, my body is going to take that as a sign of, oh, she needed all that milk. We should make it again. So instead, I just ride it out. It makes for a really rough, I want to say 2 days. I spent a good 2 days with that really hard feeling in my chest, feeling like it was never going to change, feeling like I was going to be like that forever. But I just waited it out. I just leaned into heat, leaned into just feeding your baby. Do your normal feeds, make sure they're getting full feeds. And I don't do a schedule. I personally just, when my baby's hungry, I feed him. The only thing I do monitor is that he never goes more than 3 hours without eating. And that's mainly at nighttime. During the day, he doesn't go 3 hours without eating. He wants to eat like every hour, and I'm fine with that. Personally, I don't do a schedule with feeding with the newborn phase. If your baby seems hungry and they're not spitting up because they have too much in their system, I let them eat. And that's kind of how I monitor it, you know, like let him do a full feed. We do the burp, we do the, moving around, a little bit of movement to make sure he gets all the air bubbles out. But if he wants to eat again an hour later, as long as he's not having, any kind of reflux or a lot of spit up to where he's too full, then I'm gonna feed him and let him eat. Personally, I'm trying to pack a little bit of weight on him right now. So if he wants to eat, go for it. But you spend those first couple days just letting your baby work through that milk supply, and that's telling your body what your actual usage is. So as long as you don't play with it and lean into pumping, then it will figure out what your baby needs. Now, there are always situations where this could be different. If you're struggling with your supply, if you're not getting enough, then those are times when, talk to someone who does specific, lactation consulting. But that is a time when leaning into pumping can actually help convince your body that you do need more. So there are times when it makes sense. But in my situation specifically, my body was making plenty. I didn't need it to make more. I just needed it to settle down a tiny bit. So the only thing I did, like I said, was lean into heat and then just kind of run through a normal day with baby. Now, the other big change that you're going to notice during those first 7 days, so I already did days 1 through 3, if you want to go back to that video. But days 4 through 7 is also when your baby's poops are going to dramatically change. Because those first 3 days, every baby's a little bit different, but typically those first 3 days, they're working through the meconium poops. There's really black, tarry, very interesting poops that will ruin a blanket so fast. We almost lost a blanket, but I was able to get it out of the blanket. I just had to wash it 3 times. But you move from that meconium poop into this weird middle phase that's kind of like a meconium / green / slightly runnier poop phase. And that's a rough one for a day or so. And then once your milk is really coming in and you're noticing that baby's like really gulping while they're eating, like I can hear him eating every time now because so much milk is in there, then that's going to transition that poop again to the breast milk poops. And the breast milk poops are dramatically different than meconium. They tend to be like a orangish yellow, and they'll be seedy looking. And by that, I mean they have like almost, it looks like little seeds in them. And that's totally normal for a breast milk poop. It can be a little bit alarming the first time you see it if you're not looking for that or you're not familiar with that, but it's totally normal. Now, if you're doing formula, your poops are likely going to look different. Both of my postpartums, we've done breast milk, so I'm not familiar with the normal transition with formula poops, so you're going to want to look that up. But I imagine it's very different than breast milk poops. But you would see that transition. Your transition is going to be different too, depending on when you start the formula. So you want to look into all those things. This is just talking about the transition of a week of breastfeeding. Another big one for days 4 through 7 is I lean so heavily into using a haka. If you've never heard of a haka, I highly, 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 highly recommend having one. You don't need multiple, you maybe 2, but for the most part, I just use the same one all day. So you don't need a bunch of them. But I'll put up a picture of what a haka looks like. Now, I use this for passive milk collection. And what I mean by that is, so one of the hard parts about this first week and first couple weeks, honestly, is every time your baby cries or makes certain noises, your body hears it and your milk will start to flow. If you're not prepared for that, like you'll be in the middle of changing their diaper and they'll get a little fussy and all of a sudden you'll look down and your shirt will be soaked on both sides. One thing you can do to hold that off is just apply a little bit of pressure, like kind of right into your nipple, and just kind of hold it for like 30 seconds. And a lot of times that will keep it from continuing to pour out. If I'm getting ready to feed him anyways, sometimes I'll just put like a burp cloth over it just to catch it for a second until I get situated. But your body's gonna start flowing. So prepare to change your clothes like 4 times a day right now. Most days right now, I feel like Shrek, like you're a hot mess. You're likely not bathed. You're on outfit number 3, 4 of the day. You're covered in milk, spit up. I think at the very beginning of this video, I had spit up all over me. That's just what this time is. And it's just part of it. So don't wear your nicest clothes or expect to go out because you're not gonna be able to. Back to the haka though, the way that I use it is for passive milk collection. So anytime I'm feeding him, so say I'm feeding him on my left side, I put the haka on my right side and it will passively collect milk. And most feeding sessions, it will passively collect 1 to 2 ounces for me. Now, I'm not pumping with the Haka. How I personally use it is I just kind of very lightly suction it over my nipple, and you shouldn't feel any pain, any discomfort. Like, you're just suctioning it enough that it stays in place. It's just like it's held there, but it should feel almost like weightless, like nothing's on your boob at all. You shouldn't feel any pain. If you do, you've suctioned it too hard onto there, and you don't need to do that. There's some other ways you can put it on too. I've seen people that like fold the flap back and then watch a couple videos on it, but I have like my own rhythm. You know, I breastfed my first for 18 months. So we kind of just got into a flow, and that's just how I use the Haka every time now. That method works really well for me. So like I said, I just very lightly will suction it onto the other side, just enough so it stays in place. And then I leave it there the whole time I'm feeding him on the other side. And it will passively collect milk for you. And personally, that's the only thing I do to build up my milk supply in the freezer. We are on day 9 now of having a baby, and I think I already have like 10 bags of milk in the fridge, and all of those are just from passive collection using the Haka. I also find that these first 3 months are the easiest time for me personally to collect the extra milk, because he's so small, and my body tends to be producing a lot more. As with my first, as she got bigger and older, I struggled just to keep up with her demand. And I found myself I was still collecting some, you know, over those next year or so, but not nearly as these first 3 months. So I highly recommend using the Haka, especially these first 3 months, just to build up your freezer supply, build up your extras. And it's just, like I said, it's just passive collection. So it's not taking up any more of your time. It's so convenient and it's so wonderful. So I highly recommend. That has helped tremendously to make this an easier transition. Like I said, with this being my second postpartum, all of these things have just flowed more seamlessly. Whereas the first time I went through them, it's almost like you get hit with the next thing, and then you've got to figure out what that thing is, you know, like troubleshoot it. And then it's just a little bit exhausting. So that's a big part of why I'm making this video, to just talk through the normal things that I experience and how I kind of work through them. The other thing is, you're really trying to figure out babies' sleep. Newborns, you know, if you look it up, there's a mixed amount of hours they're supposed to sleep in a day. Personally, I kind of just watch his behavior, and when he's super extra fussy or he's been awake too long, I just try and encourage sleep. My biggest struggle this time is I have a 2-year-old and a newborn. So his biggest struggle with sleeping during the day is that his sister is not quiet. She is very much the opposite. But it's working out fine. I'm just finding ways to find a rhythm around that so that I make sure he's still getting sleep during the day. She's still able to be her, 2-year-old wild self. That's a new rhythm that I'm trying to find the second time. At night, personally, with breastfeeding, I found that both times have really leaned into heavy sleep at night. And I'm very thankful for that. My thing is, if baby sleeps, once they hit 3 hours of sleep, I personally wake them up, and I'll go through a full diaper change, because typically after 3 hours, they've, done a number of things in their diaper. I don't want them sleeping in that. And after that diaper change, they tend to wake up enough to where they'll do a full feeding, and then I put them back to bed. With him, sometimes he's waking up every 2 hours, which is totally fine, totally normal. Again, I just go through the full diaper change first, and then we do the full feeding. And a lot of times that full feeding will put him back to sleep, just put him back down. And it's just kind of a rhythm we're going through right now. Just make sure your baby does a burp, especially after your full milk supply comes in. If you don't, they will likely have spit up. There'll be a lot of frustration. There'll be a lot of discomfort for them. So I do really prioritize those middle of the night burps after feeding. because it tremendously helps him sleep. It tremendously helps keep him from having spit ups or having, you know, just a lot of fussiness. And sometimes it can take a minute. You know, you might be spending a good 5 minutes trying to get a good burp. I'll do a couple different things, you know, I'll do some sways, I'll do some lean forward, lean back, because sometimes just patting their back doesn't do it, you know, especially when they're this little. I feel like as they get older, that gets a little bit easier. But right now, a lot of times it's more that light swaying, a little bit of position change, and then he'll do a massive burp that, you know, you're surprised it comes out of something so small. But that's helped tremendously with sleep. So I'm getting sleep in good 2-hour chunks, which 1 week into postpartum, that is glorious sleep. Celebrate that. You're not going to get a full 8-hour night of sleep because your baby really does need to eat, you know. We're trying to really pack on that weight. Their stomachs are so tiny. So I'm not trying to get him to sleep through the night. I want him to sleep all night, but I also want him to eat all night. Those are my two big focuses. Those are the main big ones for days 4 through 7. Like I said, you're going to feel like a hot mess. You're going to look like a hot mess. You're literally going to change your clothes 4 times a day from either spit up, you've been peed on, you've been pooped on, or your milk supply is just raining down your shirt. And that's just part of it. So, and it's not forever. It's not forever. Your milk supply is going to stabilize. I'm on day 9 now, at the time I'm making this video, and mine has already gone to where my chest feels comfortable. I'm not overfilling anymore. They don't feel like boulders anymore. I feel like they're really regulating to his needs, and it's helping my comfort level. So just give it a little time. You're gonna get there. You've just gotta get through that first week. The first week I personally think is the hardest for breastfeeding, just because you're trying to create a system that wasn't there. So try and breathe through it. It's going to be okay. And if you have any big problems that come up, there are so many people you can call and ask for help. You know, there's so many paid consultants. A lot of times there's free clinics that will help you. There's, I think, a 24/7 hotline you can call for breastfeeding support and help. I highly recommend, or just call your mom friends that have done it before. You know, the moms that have 2 or 3 kids, they're not going to be annoyed with you. I promise. They're going to remember what it was like, and they're going to know the struggles you're going through. So don't feel like you're alone. You're not. But mostly just celebrate that you're getting through it one day at a time and you're going to survive. My next video, I will be doing the second week of postpartum, and then I'll probably be doing a weekly series of just kind of what we're focusing on, what our weeks look like, because I know it's really hard, you know, when you are a new mom to, you know what to expect and to have some troubleshooting. And like I said, with this being my second time, it's been much easier in some ways and harder in other ways, you know, because I do have 2 now. But the actual rhythm of navigating a newborn is definitely coming much easier because I'm more familiar with what happened the first time. I hope this video was helpful. And if you're in the thick of this, just know that you're going to be fine. You're going to get through it, and just snuggle your baby, appreciate that they're here, and just breathe.